What if you could hold in your hands a treasury of divine wisdom, compact enough to fit in a single sentence, yet powerful enough to change the course of your entire life? That's exactly what the Book of Proverbs offers. It's not just a collection of ancient sayings or moral advice. It's a spiritual map, hand-drawn by God Himself, pointing out safe paths, warning of unseen traps, and showing how to build a destiny that lasts. Every verse in Proverbs is like a key, unassuming, on the outside, but capable of unlocking doors in your mind, your home and your heart that may have been sealed for years. But these are not just poetic phrases to be admired. They are living truths meant to be applied in real-world dilemmas, in moments of quiet tears, in choices that keep you awake at night, in crossroads that feel impossible to navigate. In the next 15 principles, we're not simply going to quote verses, we're going to unlock them, unpacking their meaning, translating them into action, and showing how they speak to the pressures of modern life. Some of these truths may feel familiar, others may hit you like a brand new revelation, but each one is an invitation, not just to know wisdom, but to live it. So take a deep breath, lean in, let the word speak, because when God's wisdom speaks, it doesn't just inform, it transforms. Have you ever wished you could hold in your hands a map, not to a city or a treasure, but to your very life? A guide that could lead you past pitfalls, warn you about hidden traps, and take you straight to the places of peace, purpose, and joy. That's exactly what the Book of Proverbs is, a divine map designed by God Himself. It doesn't simply hand you pleasant advice to make you feel good. It is strategic, precise, and timeless. Each verse is like a compass point that orients your heart toward truth. And just like a physical map, its value is only realized when you actually follow it. Knowing it exists is not enough. Walking its path is what transforms you. Proverbs is not a manual of suggestions. It is a spiritual navigation system. Every word is calibrated to lead you toward the heart of God and away from the snares of the enemy. Imagine walking through a dark forest at night without light or direction. Every step feels dangerous. Now imagine having a map that not only shows you the safest paths, but also warns you where wolves hide. That's what divine wisdom does. It points out danger zones in relationships, business, speech, and even in the hidden motives of your heart. Without it, people wander in circles, repeating cycles of pain they could have avoided. The beauty of Proverbs is that it works in real life, not just in theory. This is not abstract philosophy locked in dusty theology books. It is wisdom forged in the reality of human experience. It was written by people who lived, loved, fought, failed, repented, and learned from God Himself. That's why it speaks with such authority. It comes from those who have already walked through the storms and returned to hand you the map. When you read it, you're receiving insider knowledge from the Creator of life, telling you how life works best. Ignore it, and you walk blindfolded toward cliffs you can't see. Every verse in Proverbs is like a key that opens a door you didn't even know was locked. Some unlock freedom from fear, others unlock discernment for decision-making, others still unlock peace in moments of chaos. And here's the truth. The doors they open are not just external. They open the locked rooms of your mind, where limiting beliefs have lived for years. They open the chambers of your heart, where bitterness has built walls. They open the unseen vault where your purpose has been waiting for you to find it. A key is useless unless you insert it and turn it. Wisdom works the same way. But a map, no matter how detailed, won't help if you keep choosing your own shortcuts. Proverbs confronts that pride gently but firmly. It reminds you that your feelings are not always right, your instincts are not always safe, and your experience is not always enough. God's wisdom sees beyond the curve in the road, beyond what your limited vision can perceive. This is why some people live in cycles of crisis. They keep ignoring the signs posted right in front of them. When you follow the map, you may avoid the thrill of reckless shortcuts, but you also avoid the heartbreak they bring. Wisdom doesn't just save you from destruction, it actively builds your future. It teaches you how to make small, daily choices that accumulate into stability, favor, and peace. Proverbs is strategic like that. It doesn't just focus on the big moments, but on the thousand small decisions that lead to them. It's in how you speak to others, how you manage your time, how you handle money, and how you control your emotions. That's why people who live by this book often look like they're lucky. They're simply reaping the results of a well-followed map. At the end of the day, wisdom is not something you admire from a distance. It is something you walk in. Proverbs hands you a divine blueprint and says, "Follow this, and you will live." It is a map that leads you straight into the favor of God, the peace of a clear conscience, and the strength to stand when others fall. The question is never whether the map works. It always works. The question is whether you will trust it enough to let it lead you, even when the road feels slow, narrow, or unfamiliar. Because in the end, it will take you exactly where God intended you to be, and that destination is always worth the journey. Many imagine that wisdom is a mysterious gift reserved for the highly educated, the spiritually elite, or those born with a rare talent. Proverbs dismantles that myth completely. It reveals that wisdom is not a locked vault, but an open road. Narrow, yes, but open to all who are willing to walk it. It is not found only in monasteries or ivory towers, but in everyday moments and ordinary decisions. The invitation is extended to everyone, but not everyone accepts. Why? Because wisdom demands discipline, humility, and a willingness to go against the crowd. It's not about being special, it's about being intentional. Every sunrise presents two invitations, the call of wisdom and the whisper of foolishness. They compete for your attention in how you respond to people, how you handle temptation, and how you spend your time. The wise path is rarely the easiest. It often requires self-denial, patience, and long-term thinking. The foolish path, on the other hand, promises quick gratification, but always hides long-term pain. Proverbs shows that true wisdom is making the consistent choice to do what is right, even when there is no applause and no one is watching. It is a discipline of the heart, not just of the mind. Wisdom is not something you stumble upon by accident. It's something you pursue. You choose it when you pause before speaking in anger. You choose it when you turn down an unethical opportunity, even if it's profitable. You choose it when you listen to advice instead of brushing it off. These choices may seem small, but they form the architecture of your life. The fool believes that big crises are where wisdom matters most. The wise know that small decisions are where wisdom begins. Proverbs reminds us that consistency is more valuable than occasional brilliance. One of the most liberating truths about biblical wisdom is that it is not measured by IQ, academic degrees, or eloquent speech. A humble, uneducated person can walk in greater wisdom than a proud scholar if their heart is teachable. Proverbs declares that a fool can be educated and a wise man can be simple. It is the posture of your heart, not the weight of your resume, that determines your capacity for wisdom. A teachable spirit will go further than a head full of facts. Knowledge fills the mind, wisdom shapes the soul. Choosing wisdom daily means understanding that it is not theoretical, it is practical. It affects how you drive in traffic, how you treat the cashier, how you respond to criticism. It's not just about surviving life's storms, but about shaping the climate of your everyday environment. The wise know that kindness in small moments is as much a mark of wisdom as strategic thinking in major decisions. The tone you set in your daily life will often speak louder than your grand achievements. Wisdom turns ordinary acts into sacred. Ground Proverbs also makes it clear that ignoring wisdom is never neutral. It's self-destructive. The one who rejects wisdom is not simply opting out, but is building the foundation for their own collapse. Refusing to walk in wisdom is like ignoring cracks in the foundation of your home. The structure will eventually fall. Every time you dismiss correction or choose convenience over what is right, you are reinforcing weakness in your life. The wise, however, see correction as construction, a reinforcement that makes them stronger for the future. At the end of the day, walking in wisdom is about long-term vision. It is about planting seeds today that will bear fruit years from now. Those who choose wisdom consistently find that their lives are marked by stability, peace, and favor, even if they face storms. The road is narrow and often lonely, but it leads to a place of unshakable strength. And the best part, anyone can walk it if they are willing to take the first step and then keep stepping every single day. That's the power of wisdom. It is always available, but it must be chosen. Proverbs opens with a statement that shakes the foundations of how we think about wisdom. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. This isn't about terror that paralyzes or dread that pushes us away. It is about a reverence so deep that it shapes every decision we make. It is the recognition that God is infinitely greater than we are, wiser, purer, more powerful, and that life only works when it's aligned with His design. This fear is not a chain that binds, it's a compass that guides. Without it, wisdom collapses into mere human cleverness. The fear of the Lord is not about avoiding punishment, it's about protecting relationship. When you honor Him, you naturally avoid the choices that grieve His heart. It becomes less about, can I get away with this? And more about, will this please Him? That shift changes everything. Suddenly your moral compass is not determined by culture, trends, or personal feelings, but by the eternal standards of a God who never changes. Proverbs shows us that this is the kind of fear that builds stability in life, because you're not tossed around by the shifting winds of opinion. Without this foundation, every other form of wisdom is shaky. A person can be brilliant in business, but corrupt in character. They can have strategic skill, but use it for selfish gain. The fear of the Lord roots wisdom in righteousness, ensuring that it is not just smart, but also good. This is why Proverbs presents the opposite of the fear of the Lord as foolishness, living as if you are your own highest authority. The fool believes he can run his life on his own terms, blind to the traps ahead. The wise surrender control to the one who sees the whole road. This fear also protects us from subtle dangers. Many traps in life don't look dangerous at first. They come disguised as opportunities, compliments, or quick solutions. But the fear of the Lord acts like a light in the darkness, revealing what is really there. It keeps you from stepping into business deals that look lucrative but are ethically wrong. It stops you from forming relationships that seem exciting but will ultimately pull you away from God. It even guides your inner thoughts, stopping bitterness before it takes root. It is a guardrail for both the heart and the mind. The fear of the Lord also brings freedom, and that surprises many people. When you respect God above all else, you become less vulnerable to the manipulation of people. If you're not chasing human approval, you can stand firm in truth even when it's unpopular. Your confidence doesn't come from circumstances, but from knowing you're aligned with the King of the universe. This is why Proverbs can boldly say that the one who fears the Lord need fear nothing else. That's not arrogance, it's anchored trust. It's worth noting that the fear of the Lord is not a one-time lesson. It's a lifelong posture, one that deepens with every step you take with Him. You might begin fearing Him out of duty, but as you grow, that fear is mingled with love. You start seeing His commands not as restrictions, but as protection. you. Realize his ways are higher, not to limit you, but to lift you into the fullness of life he designed for you. That's why those who truly fear the Lord often radiate peace. They've learned that obedience leads to joy. Ultimately, the fear of the Lord is the soil where wisdom grows. Without it, even the most intelligent person will eventually stumble into ruin. With it, even the simplest soul can live with divine clarity and strength. Proverbs doesn't start with this truth by accident. It's the cornerstone of everything that follows. You can read every verse in the book, but until your heart bows in reverence to God, it will all remain information. When you fear the Lord, information becomes revelation, and revelation becomes transformation. That's when wisdom truly begins. Picture a crowded city square at rush hour, horns blaring, people shouting, deals being made, arguments flaring, and distractions pulling in every direction. Now imagine a clear, strong voice rising above it all, calling not for attention, but for transformation. That's the image Proverbs paints when it says that wisdom cries aloud in the streets, raising her voice in the public square. She isn't hiding in quiet monasteries or locked conference rooms. She's right in the middle of life's noise, speaking to anyone who will stop and listen. But most people don't. The problem isn't that wisdom is silent, it's that we're too busy to hear her. Life's chaos can drown out the very voice that would save us from destruction. We fill our days with meetings, scrolling, entertainment, and endless comparison, but give no space to reflect on the choices we're making. Proverbs warns that ignoring wisdom is not a harmless decision. It's an invitation for disaster. The tragedy is that wisdom doesn't whisper to a select few. She shouts to the many, yet the many walk past, distracted, thinking they already know better. Wisdom's voice isn't always soothing. Sometimes it's confrontational. She calls out our patterns of self-sabotage, our willingness to chase what's temporary, our tendency to ignore red flags. Her tone may feel uncomfortable because she's not there to entertain, she's there to rescue. When you hear her, you may feel exposed, but that's the beginning of change. Proverbs reminds us that correction is an act of mercy. To reject it is to choose a harder lesson later, one that often comes with heavier consequences. The striking thing is where wisdom chooses to speak, not in isolated safety, but in the very places where bad decisions are most tempting. She cries out at the gates where business is transacted, in the marketplaces where deals are struck, and in the streets where people rush past each other in anonymity. She positions herself where temptation lurks, where pride thrives, where quick gains are offered. Why? Because those are the battlegrounds where the direction of a life can shift in a single decision. Hearing wisdom requires intentional stillness in the middle of movement. It's learning to quiet the inner noise long enough to let her words sink in. That might mean pausing before responding to an insult, thinking twice before signing a contract, or stepping away from a relationship that feels exciting but erodes your soul. In a world that glorifies impulsiveness, the ability to stop, listen, and choose carefully is a radical act of faith. It's admitting that God's perspective is worth more than your rush to decide. Proverbs also shows that wisdom often speaks through people. A parent's caution, a mentor's correction, a friend's honest feedback. But pride can make us deaf, convincing us that those voices are outdated, overly cautious, or irrelevant. The fool despises such counsel. The wise gather it like treasure. Every warning you ignore today becomes a consequence you face tomorrow. God often sends wisdom through human vessels, and to reject them is to reject Him. In the end, the voice of wisdom is not competing for your entertainment. She's fighting for your survival. Her call is urgent because time is not unlimited. Every moment you walk past her voice without responding is a moment closer to a decision you may regret for years. The good news? She hasn't stopped calling. Even in chaos, her voice is clear for those willing to turn their heads and hearts toward it. The question is simple. Will you keep walking with the crowd, or will you stop, listen, and let wisdom lead you out of the noise and into life? Proverbs doesn't shy away from telling us the truth. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. This is not poetic exaggeration. It is spiritual reality. Words are not neutral. They are seeds, and every seed produces a harvest, for good or for harm. What you say shapes the atmosphere in your home, the direction of your relationships, and the future of your own heart. A single sentence can mend a broken spirit or crush it beyond repair. That's why Proverbs compares the right word to apples of gold in settings of silver. Beautiful, valuable, and perfectly timed. The fool speaks without thinking, rushing to respond, interrupt, and defend. He uses words to win arguments, not to seek truth. The wise, however, understand that words have weight, and therefore they slow down before releasing them. Silence, for the wise, is not weakness, it is mastery. They know that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all, because the wrong word at the wrong time can undo years of trust, while the right word at the right time can restore it instantly. Our words reveal more about our hearts than we realize. You can try to control your image in public, but in unguarded moments, your mouth will betray the condition of your soul. Proverbs makes it clear, the mouth speaks from what fills the heart. A bitter heart produces bitter speech. A peaceful heart produces peaceful words. That's why wisdom is not just about learning to talk better. It's about letting God transform the source, your inner life. Change the heart, and the words will follow. The greatest battles in relationships are often fought and won in the arena of speech. A spouse's careless criticism can harden the other's heart for years, while a single word of encouragement can reignite love. Parents can shape a child's confidence or insecurity through what they say day after day. Leaders can inspire loyalty or breed resentment simply through tone and choice of words. Proverbs teaches us that words are tools. You can use them to build bridges or to burn them. One of the most overlooked aspects of speaking wisely is knowing when to speak to God before speaking to people. Prayer aligns the tongue with the spirit. It allows us to unload frustration in His presence rather than on someone else. The wise often find that what felt urgent to say in the moment feels unnecessary after bringing it before the Lord. This is why Proverbs connects wisdom to self-control. It's the ability to pause long enough for heaven to weigh in before your words hit the earth. Gossip, slander, and reckless speech are recurring warnings in Proverbs because they destroy faster than almost anything else. Unspoken words cannot be retrieved. They spread like wildfire, often carrying half-truths or outright lies that damage reputations and relationships. The wise refuse to be carriers of such poison. They understand that repeating a matter can stir up conflict, while concealing it can bring peace. This restraint is not about hiding truth, but about protecting unity and preventing unnecessary harm. Ultimately, the tongue is a tool God designed for blessing, to encourage, to teach, to comfort, to worship. When surrendered to Him, our words can speak life into dead situations and hope into weary souls. But left unchecked, that same tongue can become a weapon that wounds deeply. Proverbs calls us to make a choice every day. Will your words plant life or sow death? The wise choose carefully, knowing that what they speak today will echo into eternity. One of the most overlooked forms of wisdom is the ability to learn from someone else's pain instead of repeating it. Proverbs shows us that the wise observe, while the fool insists on personal experience for every lesson. This isn't about being judgmental, it's about being discerning. You don't have to drive off the cliff to know the fall will hurt. God often allows us to witness the consequences of others' choices as warnings, not as entertainment. Those warnings are gifts. To ignore them is to invite the same wounds into our own story. The wise person studies the patterns of life. They notice what happens to those who chase quick riches, to those who despise correction, to those who walk with the wrong crowd. They store these observations as guardrails for their own path. The fool, however, mocks such caution, convinced they will be the exception. They underestimate how consistent spiritual laws are, that sowing always precedes reaping. Proverbs warns that this mindset is dangerous because life will prove it wrong, often in painful ways. Scripture gives us countless case studies: Samson's pride in his own strength, Saul's disobedience, Judas's love for money. Each of these stories is a living billboard saying, "Do not go this way." Yet history repeats itself because pride convinces people they will succeed where others failed. The wise understand that humility means listening to the lessons carved into the past, both in Scripture and in the lives around them. They know those lessons cost someone something, and they honor that cost by learning from it. Sometimes, the most painful examples come from people we love: a relative who lost their marriage to infidelity, a friend whose business collapsed from dishonesty, a leader whose arrogance destroyed their influence. It's hard to watch, but those moments are invitations to self-reflection. They whisper, "This could happen to you too if you take the same steps." The wise don't look with superiority, they look with sobriety, letting the truth reshape their own decisions. Pride is the barrier that keeps many from learning this way. It convinces you that you are immune, that your intentions will protect you from consequences. But Proverbs teaches that intentions alone don't shield you from the harvest of your actions. The wise don't just ask, "What do I want to do?" They ask, "Where does this path lead?" They evaluate not only the action but also the trajectory, and if it mirrors someone else's road to ruin, they turn around before it's too late. This kind of wisdom also recognizes that God may put certain situations in our sight specifically to protect us. You may hear about a moral failure in your field, a financial scandal in your industry, or a public downfall in your community, not so you can gossip, but so you can guard yourself. These are not random headlines. They are divine caution signs. To treat them as entertainment is to waste the warning. To treat them as lessons is to fortify your life against the same traps. In the end, learning from the mistakes of others is an act of humility and gratitude. It honors the truth that life is too short to make every mistake yourself. It keeps you from wasting years rebuilding what could have been preserved. The wise see someone else's crash and adjust their driving. The fool sees it and presses the gas. Proverbs calls us to open our eyes, pay attention, and let the lessons around us become the guardrails that keep us safe. In a culture that celebrates personal freedom and despises restraint, discipline is often seen as an enemy. Yet Proverbs flips that thinking on its head, declaring that whoever loves discipline loves knowledge. Biblical discipline is not born from anger or rejection. It flows from love and protection. God disciplines not to crush but to correct, not to shame but to save. Like a skilled craftsman shaping raw wood, he uses the tools of correction to refine us into vessels of purpose. His discipline is proof that he hasn't given up on us. A loving parent does not ignore their child's dangerous behavior. They set boundaries not to imprison, but to keep them safe. In the same way, God places divine limits around our lives, knowing that stepping beyond them can lead to harm we cannot foresee. The fool resents these boundaries, interpreting them as control. The wise see them as care, as fences that protect, and them from falling off spiritual cliffs. In Proverbs, correction is not punishment, it is prevention. Discipline is also a training ground for wisdom. It teaches us to govern our impulses, manage our desires, and align our actions with God's standards. The uncorrected life is a life destined for collapse. because without discipline, strength turns to arrogance and freedom turns to chaos. Proverbs makes it clear, the one who ignores correction is embracing their own destruction, but the one who accepts it, even when it hurts, is building a foundation that can withstand storms. The discomfort of discipline often hides its true reward. In the moment it feels like loss, the loss of comfort, convenience, or pride. But over time, discipline yields a harvest of peace and maturity. Those who endure it learn that delayed gratification leads to lasting gain, while instant gratification often leads to regret. The wise embrace the temporary sting for the sake of long-term stability. The fool, unwilling to endure the sting, ends up living with wounds far more painful. True discipline also requires humility. It means admitting, "I was wrong," and choosing to adjust before circumstances force the change. The wise self-correct. The fool waits until correction is unavoidable. Self-discipline is the mark of spiritual maturity. It's when you allow God's word to confront you in private so your life doesn't collapse in public. This quiet alignment with truth may go unnoticed by others, but it is always seen and rewarded by God. God's discipline also reveals his deep investment in our future. He is not a passive observer, letting us drift toward destruction. He steps in, sometimes through scripture, sometimes through people, sometimes through circumstances, to get our attention. Each act of correction is a declaration of love. I care too much to let you continue this way. The wise listen early, understanding that every moment spent resisting discipline is a moment delaying blessing. In the end, discipline is not the enemy of joy, it is its guardian. Without discipline, desires run wild and eventually destroy the very happiness they promise to deliver. With discipline, life has structure, focus, and the capacity to sustain blessing. Proverbs shows that love and discipline are inseparable, and that to reject one is to misunderstand the other. God's discipline may sting in the moment, but it spares us from scars that would last a lifetime. That's why the wise not only endure discipline, they welcome it. Proverbs 14:1 delivers one of the most profound truths in a single sentence. The wise woman builds her house, but with her own hands, the foolish one tears hers down. This is not about architecture, it's about influence. A home is more than walls. It's the atmosphere, the values, and the relationships that fill it. The wise woman understands she is not just maintaining a place to live, she is constructing a spiritual refuge. Every decision, word, and attitude she brings into that space either strengthens or weakens its foundation. The wise woman builds quietly but powerfully. She doesn't need to dominate or demand to shape her home. She influences through example, prayer, patience, and discernment. Her strength lies in her ability to transform conflict into peace, scarcity into gratitude, and fear into faith. She understands that her reactions teach as much as her words. Children learn to trust God not just by hearing about him, but by seeing. Her walk with him, her presence becomes an anchor, even when the world outside is chaotic. Wisdom in the home is not about perfection, but about alignment with God's ways. The wise woman recognizes her own flaws, seeks correction, and keeps her heart soft toward the Lord. She does not use her influence to manipulate or control, but to nurture and guide. She guards her speech, knowing that words can either plant seeds of confidence or roots of insecurity in her family. She doesn't allow bitterness to take root, but chooses forgiveness, even when it's costly. Her home becomes a living testimony of grace. By contrast, the foolish woman tears her house down, and often without realizing it. This destruction is rarely instant, it's gradual. A cutting remark here, a comparison there, a habit of negativity that seeps into the family culture. She may focus on outward appearances while neglecting the unseen spiritual structure. Proverbs warns that this erosion of the home begins in the heart. What is harbored internally will eventually manifest externally. Without wisdom, even beauty, charm, and talent cannot hold a household together. The wise woman's influence extends beyond her home. She is a stabilizing force in her community, her church, and her friendships. People seek her counsel because her life demonstrates the fruit of her faith. She doesn't just care for her own needs, she sees the needs of others and acts with compassion. Proverbs 31 paints her as industrious, generous, and prepared, not because she fears the future, but because she trusts the one who holds it. Her wisdom flows into every sphere she touches. For single women, widows, or those without children, this principle still applies. Building a house can mean shaping a workplace culture, nurturing friendships, or mentoring others. The call is not limited to physical motherhood, but to spiritual stewardship. Wherever God places her, the wise woman uses her influence to cultivate stability, growth, and faith. Her house becomes whatever sphere of responsibility God entrusts to her, and her wisdom ensures it flourishes. In the end, the wise woman's strength is not in her control over circumstances, but in her surrender to God. She builds because she listens, prays, and obeys. She understands that every home, physical or spiritual, is ultimately sustained by the Lord. Her hands are busy, but her heart remains anchored in His presence. And because of that, the work she does within, her walls ripples far beyond them, shaping lives and legacies for generations to come. In a world addicted to speed, Proverbs speaks a countercultural truth. Desire without knowledge is not good. How much more will hasty feet miss the way? Acting on impulse may feel bold in the moment, but it often disguises recklessness. The fool rushes into decisions without weighing the cost, driven by emotion, pride, or the desire for instant gratification. The wise, however, understand that waiting is not weakness. It is strength under control, the ability to hold back until God's timing and direction are clear. Impulsiveness often thrives in moments of heightened emotion, anger, fear, excitement, or even infatuation. In those moments, patience feels unnatural, even painful. But Proverbs teaches that the pause between feeling and acting is where wisdom is born. Waiting allows the dust of emotion to settle so that truth can be seen clearly. A deal that seemed irresistible yesterday might reveal hidden dangers tomorrow. A relationship that feels thrilling now might carry the seeds of heartbreak later. Waiting is not passivity, it is purposeful restraint. The wise don't stall out of fear, but delay out of discernment. They take time to pray, seek counsel, and evaluate the long-term consequences of their choices. They understand that a yes given too quickly can trap them, and a no spoken in haste can close doors God intended to open. The fool calls this hesitation, the wise call it strategy. One of the clearest distinctions Proverbs draws between the wise and the foolish is in their response to urgency. The fool confuses urgency with importance, thinking every opportunity must be seized immediately. The wise know that urgency is often a tool used to pressure people into poor decisions. They are willing to let a good deal pass if it doesn't. Align with God's will, believing that what is truly from Him will not require manipulation or panic. Impulsiveness also blinds us to unseen spiritual dynamics. Not every open door is from God. Some are traps set by the enemy. Acting without waiting on the Lord's confirmation can pull us into battles we were never meant to fight. Proverbs shows that the wise person checks not only the opportunity, but also the spiritual atmosphere around it. They ask, is this God's timing? Is this consistent with His character? If the answer is uncertain, they choose to wait rather than risk stepping outside His covering. The value of waiting is that it aligns our pace with God's. It keeps us from running ahead into situations our character is not yet ready to handle. It gives him space to prepare the path and to prepare us for the path. The wise understand that delayed action in the will of God is far more fruitful than immediate action in the will of man. Waiting is not losing time. It's investing time in alignment. In the end, impulsiveness may offer short-term excitement, but it almost always comes with long-term regret. Waiting, on the other hand, may test your patience, but it produces decisions you won't have to undo later. Proverbs teaches that the wise don't just think about where they're going, they think about how they're getting there. They'd rather arrive later with peace than sooner with chaos. Because in God's kingdom, the right thing at the wrong time is still the wrong thing. Proverbs 13:20 speaks with unshakable clarity. Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. This is not a suggestion, it is a spiritual law. The people you spend time with will shape your values, influence your decisions, and ultimately impact your destiny. You can't walk in the rain without getting wet, and you can't walk with certain people without becoming like them. The wise intentionally choose relationships that pull them closer to God, not further away. Companionship is not neutral. It is either building you or breaking you. The fool often underestimates the power of influence, believing they can walk with those who live in rebellion and remain untouched. Proverbs warns that foolishness is contagious. You may start by tolerating small compromises in your friends, but over time, those compromises begin to feel normal in your own life. The direction of your company will eventually become the direction of your heart. Walking with the wise means surrounding yourself with people who challenge you to grow, not just people who make you comfortable. Wise companions tell you the truth, even when it stings. They celebrate your victories but also call you out when you drift off course. They provoke you toward godliness, discipline, and integrity. You don't just share laughs with them, you share convictions. Their presence becomes a mirror that reflects both your strengths and your blind spots. The opposite is true with foolish companions. Their influence is subtle at first, a joke that mocks what is sacred, a suggestion to cut a corner, an invitation that leads to compromise. Slowly they dull your spiritual sensitivity. You pray less, justify more, and become numb to the warning. Signs. Proverbs shows that fools make light of sin, despise correction, and walk headfirst into trouble, and anyone beside them gets caught in the fallout. Choosing the right companions often requires the courage to walk away from the wrong ones. This is not about arrogance or thinking you're better than others. It's about guarding the calling God has placed on your life. Even Jesus, though he loved all, chose to walk most closely with a small group of disciples, and within that group he shared his deepest moments with only a few. If the Son of God chose his inner circle carefully, how much more should we? The blessing of walking with the wise is that their strength becomes your strength. When you are weary, they lift you up. When you are blind to danger, they warn you. When you forget your worth, they remind you. They inspire you to think higher, live cleaner, and love deeper. Over time, their habits, their discipline, and their reverence for God begin to shape your own life. And you, in turn, become that influence for someone else. In the end, your companions are like the rails on a train track. They set the direction of your journey. You may think you're steering your own course, but your relationships are quietly guiding you toward a destination. Proverbs makes the choice plain. Walk with the wise, and your life will bear the fruit of wisdom. Walk with fools, and you will taste their ruin. The question is not if you are being influenced. The question is by whom. Proverbs never condemns wealth itself, but it warns repeatedly about the dangers of gaining it without wisdom. Dishonest money dwindles away, but whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow. Proverbs 13:11. The issue is not the amount of money you have, but the foundation it rests upon. Wealth acquired through greed, fraud, or exploitation is like a house built on sand. It may stand for a season, but when storms come, it collapses. The wise understand that integrity must be the bedrock of every financial gain. Money is a tool, not a master. In the hands of the wise, it becomes a channel of blessing, meeting needs, advancing God's purposes, and creating stability for the future. In the hands of the foolish, it becomes a weapon of self-destruction, feeding pride, fueling reckless spending, and enabling destructive habits. Proverbs is clear. Better a little with righteousness than much gain with injustice. Proverbs 16:8. The wise would rather sleep with peace than live in luxury haunted by compromise. One of the traps Proverbs warns against is the desire to get rich quickly. The promise of instant wealth blinds people to the hidden costs, compromised ethics, broken relationships, and spiritual emptiness. The fool sees only the prize. The wise considers the price. God often allows wealth to grow slowly because the process shapes the character needed to handle it. When money comes faster than maturity, it becomes a curse, not a blessing. Wealth, without wisdom, also has a ripple effect on others. Parents who pursue riches without values often raise entitled, ungrateful children. Leaders who prioritize profit over people eventually lose both. Proverbs reveals that how you gain wealth will determine how long you keep it, and whether it will benefit or harm those around you. A wise person sees their resources as stewardship, not ownership. They hold money with open hands, ready to use it for good rather than gripping it for selfish gain. The wise also guard against the illusion that wealth equals security. Money can vanish in a moment through economic downturns, bad investments, or unforeseen crises. Proverbs says, "Cast but a glance at riches, and they are gone." Proverbs 23:5. True security comes not from what you own, but from who owns you. The fool places their trust in bank accounts. The wise place their trust in God, who can both provide and sustain. Generosity is one of the clearest signs of wealth with wisdom. The wise know that giving is not losing. It's investing in eternal returns. They understand that money is most powerful when it is released, not hoarded. Proverbs 11:25 says, "A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed." Wealth that flows outward brings life both to the giver and to those they bless. The fool, fearing loss, clings tightly, and in doing so, they choke the life out of their own abundance. In the end, Proverbs teaches that wealth is safest in the hands of those who are not ruled by it. The wise are not defined by their possessions. They are defined by their character. They measure success not by accumulation, but by alignment, with God's principles, with integrity, and with purpose. Wealth with wisdom is not just about making a living. It's about making a difference. And when money serves God's mission instead of man's ego, it becomes a legacy that outlives you. Proverbs 16:32 makes a statement that turns worldly definitions of power upside down. Better a patient person than a warrior, one with self-control than one who takes a city. In other words, true strength is not measured by how many battles you win, but by whether you can rule your own spirit. The world celebrates those who dominate others, but Scripture celebrates those who can dominate their impulses. Mastery over yourself is the foundation for mastering anything else. Without it, every victory is temporary. Self-control is not about suppressing emotions, it's about governing them. Anger, fear, desire, and ambition are not inherently sinful, but when left unchecked, they can drive you into decisions that ruin everything you've built. The fool lets emotions dictate actions. The wise pause, pray, and align their response with God's will before moving forward. Proverbs warns that acting on impulse is like opening floodgates without a dam. Once the water rushes out, you can't control the damage. One of the greatest dangers of lacking self-control is that it often feels justified in the moment. You feel you have the right to speak your mind, to retaliate, to indulge just this once. But Proverbs shows that these moments of indulgence can undo years of discipline. A single angry outburst can shatter trust. One rash decision can destroy financial stability. The wise understand that freedom without restraint is not freedom at all. It's a setup for captivity. Self-control is deeply tied to the work of the Holy Spirit. Galatians calls it one of the fruits of the Spirit, which means it's not something you produce by sheer willpower alone. You can practice discipline, but lasting self-control comes from a surrendered heart. The more you walk in step with the Spirit, the more you will respond in His strength rather than in your own weakness. Proverbs aligns with this truth. Those who fear the Lord naturally learn to restrain themselves. The battlefield of self-control is often internal. It's the quiet decision to turn away from a tempting website, to close your mouth when an insult burns on your tongue, to decline an opportunity that feeds pride but starves integrity. No one may applaud you for these victories, but heaven sees them. The wise know that private restraint leads to public stability. The fool sacrifices the long term for the short-term applause of indulgence. Jesus himself modeled the highest level of self-control. At any moment, he could have silenced his accusers, summoned angels, or walked away from the cross. Yet he chose restraint, not out of weakness, but out of mission. His example proves that self-control is not the absence of power, but the strategic use of it. To follow him is to embrace this same discipline, knowing you could, but choosing not to, because God's will matters more than your will. In the end, mastering yourself is the greatest victory you will ever win. Without self-control, wisdom cannot fully take root because your decisions will always be hijacked by your impulses. With it, you become steady, dependable, and trustworthy, a person God can entrust with greater responsibility. Proverbs makes it clear: the strongest person in any room is not the one who can command armies or win arguments, but the one who can command their own heart. Proverbs 16:18 delivers a timeless warning. Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. Pride is not just an attitude problem, it's a vision problem. It blinds you to your weaknesses, deafens you to correction, and convinces you that you are untouchable. This is why pride is so dangerous. It makes you ignore the very signs that could save you. The higher you climb in arrogance, the harder the fall will be. The wise see pride not as a badge of confidence, but as a ticking clock toward collapse. Humility, on the other hand, is not self-deprecation. It's accurate self-assessment. It's knowing who you are in God's eyes, deeply loved, but deeply dependent on Him. The humble person doesn't deny their gifts, they simply acknowledge the giver. They understand that every talent, opportunity, and achievement is ultimately the result of God's grace. Proverbs 22:4 says, "Humility is the fear of the Lord. Its wages are riches and honor and life." In God's economy, bowing low leads to being lifted high. Pride isolates. The proud resist counsel, thinking they don't need it, and in doing so, they cut themselves off from the wisdom of others. They may rise quickly in influence, but will lack the support system needed to sustain it. The humble, however, seek counsel early and often. They invite feedback, knowing that it's better to be corrected in private than to be exposed in public. Proverbs teaches that safety is found in the multitude of counselors, but pride will always push you to walk alone. One of pride's most subtle forms is spiritual pride, believing you are closer to God than others because of your knowledge, experience, or discipline. This is the pride that plagued the Pharisees, who could quote scripture flawlessly, yet missed the heart of God standing right in front of them. Humility keeps your heart teachable even when you've walked with God for decades. The moment you Think you've arrived, you've already begun to drift. Humility also makes you a better steward of influence. When you see leadership as service rather than status, you lead with empathy and justice. The proud use their position to be served, the humble use it to serve. This posture not only honors God, but also earns the trust of people. Proverbs shows that rulers who lead with humility bring stability, while those who lead with arrogance bring ruin. God actively resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. That means pride doesn't just put you in danger, it puts you in direct opposition to God. No amount of talent or strategy can compensate for having God as your opponent. The humble, however, enjoy His favor, guidance, and protection. This is why the wise would rather humble themselves than have God do it for them, because His humbling often comes through circumstances far more painful than voluntary surrender. In the end, humility is not a weakness to overcome, but a strength to cultivate. It keeps you grounded when praised, steady when criticized, and teachable in every season. Pride builds castles in the air. Humility lays foundations that last. Proverbs makes it clear, if you want a life that stands the test of time, choose the low road, because in God's kingdom, it always leads higher than you think. Proverbs 20:7 declares, "The righteous lead blameless lives, blessed are their children after them." Integrity is not simply about avoiding wrongdoing, it is about living in such a way that your life is a clear, consistent reflection of what you believe. The Hebrew root of blameless implies completeness, wholeness, nothing hidden or fractured. A person of integrity doesn't change their moral compass depending on the situation or audience. Their yes means yes, and their no means no. Integrity is often tested in the unseen moments. It's how you treat people who can't benefit you. It's whether you honor your word when no one is checking. It's in the private choices you make when there's no applause, no consequence, and no recognition. Proverbs teaches that God weighs the heart, not just the outward actions. A reputation can be built through performance, but integrity is built through consistency, day after day, decision after decision. The legacy of integrity is not just about your personal honor. It shapes the destiny of those who come after you. Children raised in a home where honesty, faithfulness, and moral courage are non-negotiable carry those values into their own lives. They inherit more than possessions. They inherit a moral foundation. Proverbs shows that this kind of inheritance is more valuable than wealth because it equips future generations to navigate life with stability and favor. Compromise, on the other hand, erodes legacy. The fool believes they can bend the truth or cut corners just this once without lasting impact. But every compromise plants seeds that grow into distrust, broken relationships, and spiritual instability. Eventually, the cracks in character become too deep to hide. Proverbs warns that ill-gotten treasures have no lasting value because without integrity, blessings slip through your fingers like sand. Integrity often requires sacrifice. You may lose opportunities because you refuse to cheat. You may be misunderstood for standing your ground. You may walk away from profit to preserve principle. But Proverbs makes it clear, the reward of integrity is long-term stability and God's approval, which outweighs temporary gain. Better to lose a deal than to lose your soul. Better to face short-term discomfort than to carry lifelong regret. 1. Of the marks of a person with integrity is that they are the same in every environment. They don't wear different masks for work, home, and church. What you see is what you get. This consistency builds trust, and trust is the currency of influence. People follow leaders they believe in, and belief is born from integrity. Proverbs shows that those who walk in integrity walk securely because they have nothing to hide and no lies to defend. In the end, Integrity is the legacy you leave when everything else fades. Titles will be forgotten, possessions will pass to others, but the imprint of a life lived in honesty and righteousness will remain. Proverbs calls us to build not just for ourselves, but for the generations who will walk the path we've cleared. To live with integrity is to plant oak trees of trust and honor that will shade those who come long after we're gone. Every verse in Proverbs is more than advice. It is a seed. Seeds may look small and insignificant at first, but inside each one is the potential for an entire forest. The wisdom of Proverbs carries the same hidden power. A single line, when planted in the heart, can change the way you think, speak, and live. But like seeds, these truths only grow if they are planted, watered, and cared for. Reading them once is not enough. They must be meditated on and applied. Proverbs is not meant to be skimmed. It's meant to be sown. Each principle is a living truth designed to bear fruit over time. Just as a farmer doesn't expect a harvest the day after planting, we cannot expect instant transformation the moment we read a proverb. The seed needs time to root itself in our thinking, confront our habits, and redirect our desires. The fool looks for quick results. The wise are patient with the process. The power of these seeds is that they work in any soil willing to receive them. It doesn't matter your background, education, or past failures. If your heart is open, Proverbs can take root. The same truth that guided kings can guide the common laborer. The same wisdom that preserved nations can preserve your family. The difference lies not in the seed's power, but in the soil's readiness. A hardened heart rejects the seed. A humble heart welcomes it. Like natural seeds, the wisdom of Proverbs must be protected from weeds. The weeds of distraction, pride, and competing voices can choke out truth before it matures. This is why Proverbs repeatedly warns us to guard our hearts and avoid the counsel of fools. The wise are careful about what they allow into their minds, knowing that even good seed can be overwhelmed if surrounded by enough bad influences. Another truth about seeds: they multiply. One proverb applied can produce an entire harvest of blessings, which in turn produces more seeds for others. A truth you live out becomes a testimony, and that testimony plants seeds in the lives of those who watch you. In this way, Proverbs is not just personal, it's generational. The seeds you plant in your own life will bear fruit in your children, friends, and community, but seeds require consistency. The farmer returns daily to tend the soil, water the plants, and watch for signs of growth. In the same way, we must return to Proverbs again and again, reading, reflecting, and realigning our actions. The fool gives up when the change feels slow. The wise trust that the harvest will come in God's timing. This daily engagement with wisdom keeps the soil of our hearts fertile and ready for more truth. In the end, Proverbs is God's seed bag, handed to us with the invitation to plant generously. Some seeds will sprout quickly, others will take years to mature, but all are capable of producing eternal fruit. The wise don't just collect these seeds, they scatter them in every area of life, because when you sow the wisdom of God, you're not just growing a better present, you're cultivating a future that will outlive you. We've walked through 15 timeless keys from the Book of Proverbs, principles that are as relevant today as they were when first spoken thousands of years ago. Each one is a seed, waiting to be planted in the soil of your daily life. And like any seed, their power isn't in being admired on the surface, but in being buried deep, nurtured, and lived out. Wisdom that stays in your notebook changes nothing. Wisdom that moves from your ears to your heart and from your heart to your feet. That kind of wisdom reshapes families, restores relationships, realigns priorities, and even redirects destinies. So here's the real question. Which of these keys will you use today? Not someday, not when life settles down. Today, The Book of Proverbs wasn't written to decorate walls, it was written to shape souls. If you let it, these truths will become the steady compass when emotions run high, the gentle voice in moments of temptation, the anchor in seasons of uncertainty, and the light in places you thought would stay dark forever. Keep returning to them, keep meditating on them, and most importantly, keep walking them out, because wisdom, like faith, grows when it's practiced daily. And as Proverbs reminds us, those who walk with wisdom will find not just knowledge, but life itself.